I'm really excited to share this episode with our community, this holiday episode. We've wrapped in moments from some of our favorite guests this season. We had, Kristen Vangness talking about creativity and Kristen McGuiness talking about writing and writing from this empowered place. So there's some really beautiful and genius conversations that we've brought into one gift episode for our community.
I loved. It's funny when we have guests. It's like someone brought a new flowers to the house. It's like, because Katie and I love our conversations, and then when someone comes in as our guest, I find so. We thought it'd be really cool to share the nuggets of all these conversations for the end of the year and to kind of launch you all into the new year.
Yeah, and it's kind of like a dinner party. This episode.
Exactly. It's exactly right. And so you'll hear snippets, so it's not one full straight, there'll be snippets of each of the conversations. So happy holidays, have a wonderful end of the year, and we'll see you in the new year.
Enjoy.
The part of me that creates, I could call it the inner child. I could call it God. I could call it the universe. I see it, though, as something very innocent and very just judgeless, just open. And I ask it to go and put itself out there. And then she does all this work, and then I destroy her. And I told myself when I went in for that audition, I was like, you're going to walk in with you. Who cares what happens? I came up with one goal, which was don't trip when you walk in the room, which if you knew my eye-hand coordination could be a good challenge. And if you don't do that, that's it. You're going to walk in that room with yourself and you're going to leave attached to yourself. You're the only person that's going to stay here with you. Everybody else could leave. You're going to stay. And it was such a powerful thing. And it was really hard to do because you kind of want to escape and go be part of the business, go be part of the people that get to beat up on her so that, you feel smart or something. But I still do that. I did that last night when I was talking to someone and I felt like, oh, how do I make this better? Should I just start collapsing and just kind of figuring out what they want out there instead of just like, baby, you're okay. You're doing a good job. And they can think whatever they're thinking about you. And let's just stay here. Let's not leave our space for them, which I think is something that I need to remember as a creator all the time.
That's so lovely that you're saying that, because when the pain of being judged is basically the pain of being abandoned, as a living being with all of these things going on all at once, and your commitment and recommitment to be with yourself. It's kind of like, you got your arm around you, and like, no matter what happens, I got my arm around you. We're staying together. And to me, that's the core of building your loving relationship with you lifelong. Because, stuff is going to happen, whether it comes from outside or in you or, from the world. And so I love that commitment, and that you were able to pull that, to yourself in the middle of all of the business.
Yeah.
Would you say, both of you, I'm curious, would you say that the less and less time between us coming back to ourselves, like we collapsing that time a little bit, do you think that's the work? Like that somehow, because we feel we get out. Like I'm wondering if the goal is not so much not to have those moments, but rather maybe to shorten how long it takes to get back on the inner loving horse of sorts.
Well, boy, I hope that that's the goal, because considering how often I fall off the horse, I hope that's the goal. I found myself literally last night, I was like, should I call and cancel? Because I don't know if I'm the kind of woman who could, they probably never do what I'm doing right. Like I do that a lot. So I hope I hope the practice, like I hope that's the practice.
Well, it sounds like you're doing the practice. And I think the doubting is also part of stretching. yourself so that you're not, going along, because everything changes so quickly that I need to be able to be agile to take myself with me in all of those different changes. And whoops, if I leave something like, whoops, I almost left her, that's going to happen. And I think what a lot of people do is, I'm just not ever going to let that happen. So I'm never going to go out of control. And I'm going to make myself rigid rather than, more all over the place.
Right. Yeah. And I think that the reactivity, I think like it's what you're saying, Sophie. I think some people, and like what Katie is saying, I think some people choose to live so much in reactivity. I find myself using so many Joni Davis words that like being a therapist right now. And I'm like, I should call her and be like, make sure I'm doing this right. She should be on this podcast.
You are doing it right.
Write it down. But like the reactivity, some people, I mean, all of us, I get reactive. And when I am reactive, I'm so afraid and I'm so convinced that my reality is the only one. If I was reactive and we were all telling our stories about how we all met each other, I would have nailed I'd be like, nope, mine's right. And that's it. And I've been like that before many times, and I will be like that again. And it's that some people that we encounter, and especially a lot of people that I think we see out in the world a lot, people live in their reactivity. And that's not to say that I'm better than them or whatever. It's just their way of surviving is like, if I just stay constantly in reactivity, because God forbid I put this down for a second and I accept that everything is yes and, that everything is happening at the same time, that all of these realities exist. It's the way I think about, like, I want to believe that there's some beautiful punchline. I don't know what it is, but I believe in that Albert Einstein, there's a friendly universe, because I have to. Mm-hmm. It's what gets me through the day. And it's why I make motions toward what I want, because I don't believe that I think it counts. I think a good thought counts. I think a prayer counts. I think a call to your representative counts. It doesn't, and even if no one hears you, it counts because you hear you. So I really believe in that. And I think that if we all knew that there was a point to every motion we made toward what we want, if we all knew we were infinite creatures, that there's no, you can't get it right. And if we all knew that, I don't feel like I couldn't linearly get through the day. So I feel like we make up these things of like, it's happening right now. The only way it works is my way. Like, I feel like that, but I want to believe that those people, even the people, I did a play in the springtime that my best friend Phineas Kiyomura wrote, and it was called Nimrod. And it was all written in verse, and it was about the Trump presidency. And it was gender bent, and it was very strange. And Lonnie was the person playing Melania, was the lead. And Nimrod, which, if you remember, was the king of Babel, was the Trump character. And I played the Trump character. And I worked on this so much because it was really hard to do, but I didn't watch any. I watched videos of him dancing, and I listened to some things, and we're all just going to make a rash generality that the queer kid right here, the left-handed queer kid, is probably a progressive. So I am. So I had my own opinions about his behavior, and I thought he was mean and all this. I still do, but I was playing this guy, and I really took such, I don't know, like kinship in his reactivity. And I found myself being this big baby that made people would get done with the show. Like, I hate that you made me love him. I still hate his behavior. But that's, I think, the key is that if we all understand that we can find behavior abhorrent, but we are all capable of abhorrent behavior. And that human beings are just human beings. We're all just broken little babies. And some of them are real whiny and really disruptive. But like the behavior is abhorrent. And I had such pleasure in being that. I got told by multiple very fancy people that I actually do the best Donald Trump impersonation of anyone they've ever seen, including Alec Baldwin. So I keep thinking, like, as a Thanksgiving present to myself, and I'm like, I might just go on Instagram and start telling stories like this weird man that people can just decide who I am.
I love it. Oh, I'd love it if you do that.
I don't know, but I think it's that reactivity. Even the people that we really demonize, even the people that I really demonize, I have to see in them like that their reactivity is hitting my reactivity. Not to say that their behavior isn't abhorrent. You shouldn't say like, not okay, get off the world's foot. Like, don't act like that. But there's still integrity to them as a human person. Did we go off on a thing?
What a beautiful thing.
I don't think so. But what I want to pull out of this is that when you were saying, I believe, my sense is, Kirsten, it's not about belief. It's that you're having a direct experience.
Oh, thank you for saying that. I really am.
So, and that's what has the juiciness and the aliveness, and that also reactivity is fear in action.
Very good.
And so as you're playing with the reactivity and actually loving it through your behavior, it shifts into creativity. Reactivity and creativity are really flip sides of each other.
It's really cool.
I first recognized that a business is a living organism. Okay, I call it a living dynamic organism because it's an entity. When you look at the word entity, like LLC, a corporation is an entity. So if you look at that as an energetic being, it's just like a child. It's similar to me. You birthed it, and then you need to take care of it. Now, hopefully you don't mold and shape your child to be what the world needs. Hopefully you just amplify what this living dynamic organism is and let the people come to it. So as far as marketing, I do it completely backwards. Most people say, oh, your target consumer is Paula. She has 2.5 bedrooms, 2 dogs, right? That's who you're targeting, which is really weird to me. And I say, well, hold on. Who is Poopery? What's her voice? What does she look like? How does she show up in the world? What does she want to do? Where does she want to be amplified? So we stay concerned just keeping that organism, which now people know it as a brand, which I believe that's the beginning. You don't treat it like a product. You treat it like this thing that's going to grow further. And now people all over the world recognize it as a brand, not just as a product, which I feel really happy about. But I believe it's because of focusing in on its essence versus what the consumer, that's where we get all the whitewashed crap. You know what I'm saying? It's like, oh, well, the consumer wants this. Prices start going down, quality starts going down, and they start compromising all over the place.
When you started with those principles, did they treat you like you were some sort of weirdo? Because that was very new when you were doing it at the beginning. Yes. Did you meet resistance at first?
Well, I still do. It's funny, if we try to get a new direct-to-consumer agency, they start going in the target, and I'm like, no. We create, even our commercials, it's to give a message and to just entertain the audience, right? And hopefully pull them in, right? We're doing all kinds of things within that, but they're always like, what consumer are we targeting? And I'm like, how about we just make the best thing we can make and then see who resonates with that? And I believe that keeps, Katie, the regenerative cycle there. Right? Because that keeps regenerating energy. And that's what I want to see. It amplifies out to the world. Keeps going.
What I'm hearing that I want to just underline is that this is an inside out model. It is a supporting what is emerging. How does that want to develop? And then letting the fullness of that, the presence, kind of the muchness of that, actually resonate with people rather than coming from a model of from the outside in. And that was one thing I really noticed. That makes a difference.
Oh, thank you. And I'm very proud to say that I don't know if I've ever met anyone when I say, oh, I founded Poopery. They're not just, oh, with delight and joy. And it's just really fun. But what I know is that they got the message of that energetic, right? Exactly. They understand the essence of that. And I'm like, oh, that feels great. So we've done a great job. It's like your child winning an Oscar or something. It's like you put them through film school or whatever, acting school, and all of a sudden they're up on stage. And that's the way I feel. It's not me. It's poopery. All I've done, I believe, is nurtured and cared for that to be the biggest expression it could be.
Well, and I hear you saying all I'm doing, which is a kind of like just, and I want to say that that approach, that way of being, I think is the future of any kind of successful and harmonic business. Is not trying to force people to have something because it's a trend or because other people are doing it or because you're going to look better than others, but it actually meets a need and creates kind of joy. Because just with poopery, rather than having the sense of this is a body function that I have to be about and is basically shameful, and you have a whole spray that's like, yeah, poop smells. And here's the way that you can enjoy the poop and not have an after effect that you're going to be embarrassed about. And just that whole model of every part of us can be included. I love that. And I think that that's part of the success of poopery and also of your model.
Oh, thank you.
How did you come about the idea? Like where did you come up with that?
I don't know if you guys, I know we're all clairvoyant or whatever, but I see things in pictures, like movies, like I see them. I don't know how, but anyway, we're at a dinner party and it was a small house, one bathroom with a whole family in there. And we were talking about bathroom odor and someone said, can you trap the bathroom odor? And I have always been kind of the closet hippie over in Plano, Texas, you know what I'm saying? But I always had my oils and I literally saw it like a movie. I saw the oil floating on top of water and I just went and I knew it was essential oils. And I just said, I can do that. Like, I just literally knew it. Now, not one person thought it was a good idea. Everybody thought I was crazy. When I would even tell them what I was doing, they would back up like 2 feet. They'd be doing with what?
Back away from the crazy lady.
Yes. And Sophie, it took me about 9 months. I just kept mixing and making everybody test, really harassing, and my neighbors would come over. I'd be like, do you got to go to the bathroom? I'd be like, number 1 or number 2, because I only could test so often, right?
You must have been like, they must have looked at you like you were some alien for a long time.
They thought I did, but this is often why I say when you have an alive idea, it's not even your idea. The idea came to you, but it came to you. So no one else is going to be able to see it the way you see it. And if you just know this is my vision, I don't need your approval. And at that point, I'd already been bankrupt twice. I'd already fallen on my face. So I really didn't care, right? It was kind of like, it'll work or it won't and whatever. But I just was holding that vision really sacred that I was gifted to see. I knew it would work because I saw it, right? I didn't need to prove to anyone else. I had no idea it'd be what it is today, but none of that mattered. I was just interested in bringing that idea to life.
That's such a valuable thing that you're saying, is that you didn't need their approval. Mm-hmm. I'm just wondering how many of our listeners really need to hear that message of, when you are creating something that's come to you or through you, you don't need others' approval, which is, again, so 180 from the way most of us are socialized, and especially women. It's like, well, who is this for? And where's the committee that says this is okay? And that's a little much for you, don't you think, dear? And all of that kind of stuff. And that modeling, I think, is just as valuable as the product itself.
Thank you. Yeah, and I really believe that, whenever I talk about resonance, it's 2 energy waves coming together that are the similar bandwidth and speed. So they're the same. So when that idea comes to you, there's a match, right? Mm-hmm. It's just a God-given match. Mm-hmm. And if you know that, and know that it's your vision. What I've learned the hard way, I used to try to convince people of the vision, right? I'd be like, no, here's how it is. Now I've, of course, learned from my master teacher, Katie. She's so good at no, right? Getting to the yes and finding people that can support. And they don't have to see the whole vision, but they trust you enough to know that you're moving in a direction. Mm-hmm. And I think that's equally important. I think I put resistance on me because that's what I was used to, as a kind of rebel in the world and trying things new. The resistance was a muscle. I had to have something to resist off of. And then I started realizing, hold on, this is hard, man. So now what I do when I have an idea, Katie, you and I talked about a new project.
Yes.
And we sort of dance together to see, like, do you get the vision? Does it feel good? I knew chill bumps, and it did, right?
Yes.
But that's the way we test. Like, I don't have to convince Katie of the vision, right? I just go, here's what I saw. What do you think? Does it feel like something you want to play? And then that creates a more, I think, cohesive and better flow of energy.
So how do you know you've slipped out of your zone of genius?
I think where it starts to feel more like work and less like play.
Yeah. Oh, that's beautiful. I think in general, that's a great phrase. If it's work instead of play, I've somehow left that zone where things are coming through, and I'm on the ride of discovery along with others. And do you notice anything, if you just think about a couple of times where you've slipped out, what's been going on when that happens?
I think I get out of creativity and more into process.
Beautiful. So that process is so important, in getting anything done, whether it's in business or in relationship. So it's that transition between the aha, and then making it real. And so it sounds to me too like your zone of genius could infuse your zone of excellence more. So play combined with process. I'm just wondering how you might play more with the getting it done part.
Yeah. And you're really speaking to my 7 in that. That's really like the desire. It's really, again, it's where it doesn't feel like work.
Oh, yeah. And I think that at some level, that's what all of us wish for, is that what we're engaged in feels like play and not like work. Wouldn't you say so, Soph?
Yeah, thank you. I was actually going to say, it's funny because one of my shtick I talk about with my clients a lot is that there's no procrastination when you actually love what you're doing. Like, people are trying to fix their procrastination by just doing more of something they don't want to do, and stop doing things you don't want to do, and then you won't procrastinate. It's the recipe.
That's so beautiful. One of the things that Gay said is that there's never enough time to do the things you don't want to do. Which I really love. And I was just thinking too about the zone of genius and play is something that emerges and goes through waves, like comes through, and then there's this period of time where you're maybe waiting for the next wave. And I'm wondering how you occupy your own unknown, where you've ridden a wave and it's gone into shore, and then now what?
Yeah, I think that's a really important thing. I think what happens is I bury myself in the mundane, and then it doesn't actually help me to get back to the zone of genius. It helps me to get to more process and live in that zone of excellence or even competence.
Yeah.
And so it's a reminder, I think, to push towards what we know is possible rather than what's right in front of us.
All right. And then you just went into we. So I'm wondering if you came back.
I don't want to take responsibility for that.
I think that's a great clue to let you know that you've reached an edge for yourself, a learning edge that, so you're not located in yourself anymore. You're located in in that we space, which is reliable for you. and that sounds like a fine place to let yourself rest, but it's not going to be a learning edge for you, because it sounds like the genius edge is, how can I bring play into more and more aspects of my day-to-day life?
Yes. Yeah.
Because when you play, I can hear it in you, and your face lights up with play. And I was just thinking also of Heraclitus, is there a Greek philosopher. The 53rd fragment of Heraclitus is, the universe is like a child at play with colored balls, which I just love. It's really a kind of a central kind of mantra for me. And if I'm not playing, I look at, where have I gotten serious or attached to an outcome, or maybe, I'm wondering if for you it is, if you're not getting input from others that you can collaborate with, where does that come from?
Yeah, I think that one of the things in the world where I live, right, in tech and big business sometimes, is that the misnomer that it has to be really serious, that it's, it's business.
To be important, to be valuable. And I do think for we playful people, which I consider all three of us, leading with play.
We for that.
Yes, we can use we for that, because it is 1, 2, 3, we, me, you, us. and running up against that, really almost on a daily level, that, for a long time, life is hard, work is hard, work is serious. If you're doing something valuable, if you guys are just playing around over there, come here and do the important stuff. So encountering other people seeing you as maybe not serious or not valuable.
Yeah, and not professional. I mean, there's all these stories around it, right? That it looks a certain way, or that achievement, comes across only that way of being very serious and formal.
Yes. And in my opinion, it also fosters the continuation of problems, rather than collaboration and solutions and new frameworks. Because if a serious problem is happening and I make a solution to it, then I've done something valuable. But if we're all just playing and something happens, that was just a mistake.
Right. Yeah. I think one of the things that maybe because with COVID, we were all sequestered in our homes, right? And so we had to find other ways to interact. We weren't having coffee together. We weren't at the water cooler. We didn't grab lunch. And one of the things we did a lot in tech was we take walking meetings, right?
Oh, what a great idea. Yeah.
And so that to me fosters play and imagination and creative problem solving. And so when we were all locked in COVID behind our computers, there was less of that. And so life took on a more serious, at least for me, a more serious bent. And it made it harder, I think, to get into that creative play.
Oh, yeah, I totally agree. I spent a lot of consideration about how I could bring movement into the on-screen experience, so that people would have the opportunity to relate with each other in that way. And my sense is that one of the things to know is that science is with you, in that play actually works much better than work. And there's a quote from Karen Purvis, a research scientist, about how we create new learning, how we create new synapses in the brain. And a new synaptic connection takes 400 repetitions. Wow. If you're working, unless you play. And then it takes between 10 and 20. Oh. So, that for me is like, it's my Bible, it's my Holy Grail quote, because it confirms everything that I've experienced over many years. And I'm imagining that when you're collaborating with people and you're playing, things are flowing and something happens and it's easy. See, because that's also a mark of genius. It's easy. that we don't value it as much. I tend to, and you tend to devalue it because it was fun.
I think this is a really big piece. And I was talking to my CEO about this the other day, and I was saying, well, that's really easy. I can put that together. And she was like, easy for you. And I thought, oh, I guess she's right, because she's a scientist, literally.
Yeah.
And what I deem her, like what she does for a living, is very difficult and doesn't seem at all like play.
Yes. Yes. So the easy for you is a mark of genius. So one of the things I've noticed over decades of doing this is that when someone is describing their genius, they just assume that everybody else can do this because it's easy. And then the easy for you is really a marker of, oh, that's something that is a genius skill of yours. And so the whole valuing it, I think that actually does become a we issue. How can we value easy and value people's genius? And then the combining of genius, that's what I find to be the most exciting, is the joining of genius. And I think that's what you do with people, is that you evoke their genius through your collaborative, ease of play and evoking, what is wanting to happen. But the question is, do you value that?
I think some of that, though, isn't some of that cultural, this like proletariat, we must, work hard and,
no pain, no gain, no pain, no gain, right? Like,
it goes back, generations, if not centuries, and I think that's all rooted in the conviction that life is hard. And that belief, then we tend to organize to make life hard to support that belief. So letting go of life being hard, I think, is very challenging for people.
I think obviously pain is a good motivator, right? And I think
yes, that's a word.
So I think it's I still know if it is actually Proust. I've tried to find this a number of times, but there's a great quote, to hope we make promises, but to pain we obey. And so I think that in my own personal career, I kept ending up in sort of the shadows of other people, and not just, ghostwriting. I mean, I will say, and I love some of the books I ghostwrote. I didn't love others as much. They were just a job. And it was I have a dear friend whose father has been a very big ghostwriter throughout the years. And he said, you ghostwrite so you can buy a house. And it's like, that's why people, truly, and there might be some people who truly love ghostwriting, but the bulk of people do it because it's very lucrative, And so, so in that, it really, I will say that's what I was doing. I mean, I knew I had to pay the bills. And then at a certain point, I realized, hey, I can do this on the side. But then I ended up in a bunch of different professional relationships where I kind of kept being the right-hand man to somebody else, even though I had the experience, I had the knowledge, I even had the contacts, like I had all the things. And yet this other person was sort of getting to be the face of the operation. And so that was really like, it was kind of like a thing where, when it happens one time, you're like, oh, that's fine. But when it starts happening consistently, you're like, no, I'm doing, and I wasn't happy with that. Some people are perfectly fine to be a right-hand man. I'm not, there's no judgment there. I mean, we all find our place in the world, but I wasn't happy doing it. And so, so I just really, it was this place where, and I think for a lot of us, pandemic kind of gave me the freedom and the emotional space to say like, hey, I don't want to do that anymore. And I keep ending up in these same relationships and I keep ending up in these same professional environments and it's not making me feel good, and yet I'm coming to the space with all of this. And I have to really look at why am I not standing in my own worth,
Yes. And so what did you learn? How did you shift that so that you actually are standing in your own worth? I have my own story about that, about learning to do that with Gay, who's this, giant presence.
Yeah.
But I'm very curious about how you moved from sort of, background to foreground of yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes gracefully, sometimes not. Say it's a little bit like, I think that's part of being an entrepreneur, though, right? I mean, really like leading your own business, whether it's whatever that business is, whether it's book coaching or writing a book. I mean, it's really like I am the face of the thing I am doing. And you're usually not going to have that in a corporate enterprise unless you're like Bob Iger, right? I mean, you usually are a fairly faceless individual in a larger business. And so when you're founder, I mean that, and yeah, I mean, I've had to navigate people not liking me, right? I mean, that's the thing. When you're in front, you take all the first arrows, like, which at first I was like, what? Like I've explained to people, I'm like, that's not, like, I'm kind of like a stoner. Like, I'm not really somebody who gets into the drama of things. Like, I was never into like high school girl drama. Like, I've always kind of just like I'm cool. Like, I don't really, and I've discovered like navigating that, because once you're the face of something, you're really like, you're so vulnerable to everything. But I think for me, it really was just this shift of, I had to really stand in. I know what I'm good at. I'm tired of feeling resentful. And I also feel like I'm tired of feeling like I'm being used. And maybe that's me putting myself in situations where I'm being used, right? Or maybe I'm also slightly being exploited by others too. I mean, there's always a dance in that. And then I quite famously sort of quit. I had a day job and then I had a night job ghostwriting books for a hybrid publisher. And I quit both of those jobs on May 4th of 2020. I joked like, may the 4th be with me. And and I really did. I was just like, and I bought this painting behind me. Literally, like when I launched the business, I bought myself a rich lady painting. And it just said, like, it's time for me to, and I think having children has been a huge part of that. I will say I might have to mute myself for a second only to give direction to a child for 1 sec. But because I'm doing this all with children, right? But I do think having kids, I believe that children are a great source of self-realization, right? Because I also recognize that I wanted them to see who I really am. And I didn't want them to grow up with a version of me that wasn't my greatest potential, right? And not that, I mean, that shows up in how I'm going to treat them. That shows up in how I'm going to live my life, but also it's going to show up in just that secure attachment, right? Like if I'm not firm in who I am and I'm making choices based out of integrity and authenticity, like they're not going to, how can they trust me as their guide? And so I know that, like, I think especially when Dylan was born and I sort of recognized, like, I mean, having two was very transformative for me. I felt like, and also it was like a break. I was, I'm an only child with a single mother. So, so being in this place where then I had like a little squad, like I was like, I got to take care of the squad. But I also like, I just didn't want to give them a life where like I couldn't be there for them. Where I was, dropping them off at 8:30 and picking them up at 5:30 and then working at night. I wanted to really be present for them. I wanted to be like, hey, you can stay home from school even though mommy has meetings. Like I want to, I mean, even this morning I was having like a bit of a kerfluffle because I knew I had this, right? And I was like, oh my God, balance. And I was like, I just always stop and say to myself, like, they're the only thing that matters. Like truly, like at the end of the day, like they're the only thing that matters. And if I let anything else matter more, like it's going to make me be terrible at both jobs. Cause then I get resentful at everybody, right? Then you get angry, like I'm angry at the job, I'm angry at the kids, And so, yeah, I just think I hit this place where I was tired of not being me and knowing it. Yeah. And then that's what they're watching.
Well, what I'm hearing this among many of the things that you're sharing is that you have your children as your is like your tent pole or your anchor, and so it's a very easy way to center yourself and also to make choices. So because you're like on a merry-go-round all the time. Yeah. So what am I going to reach for? Am I going to reach for the coin now, or am I going to focus on, keeping the merry-go-round working? But when you have something that you have is really your centering choice, I'm imagining that makes other choices easier for you.
It does. No, it does. I mean, yes. And it also can always add that, well, what's best for them too, right? I mean, I've had a lot of questions and challenges in my marriage recently where if it was what's best for me, it would be to go, right? I mean, that's very honest. I know that would be best for me. I know that 100% it would be best for me. I don't know that 100% for them. And so I do think there's places where the tentpole, though it's there, sometimes it doesn't always show me the easier path. And even now, my business has struggled over the last year because I think a lot of people in the digital economy, we had this false boom in pandemic. People were home. They were buying courses online. They were joining writers' workshops. They were in this, especially for people in the creative industry like myself. And I work with a lot of people in anti-racism. That's a lot of my clients. And so they've seen a similar, oh my God, because there was so much attention paid to their work in 2020 and 2021. And then in 2022, everybody went back to life, right? And so both the commitment to social justice or the commitment to sourdough bread making, it all kind of crashed. And so, I've been navigating that both professionally and financially, and how do I maintain this business and not end up back in a 9-to-5 job, which there's nothing wrong with that, but I know that's just not who I am. That's not my happiest space. Right. And so I do think it's always, I think it's always like a game of Tetris, right? You're always just trying to fit those pieces in, and sometimes they don't match up, and sometimes you feel like you're running out of time, and just really navigating it. But I do feel that in that sense, even as the Tetris blocks are aligning or not aligning, I do try to remember that, are they happy? Are they healthy?
Mm-hmm.
Are they kind? Am I happy? Am I healthy? Am I kind? And, and the rest of it, the oh my God, how are we going to pay this? Or, oh my God, this person's mad at me. Or, oh my God, what am I doing here? It's not as loud as it can otherwise feel.
Everybody realizes, A plus B does not equal C anymore. You can't predict where we're going. It's all much more in the unknown. And these ideas have to come from someplace we don't know. Mm-hmm. And so the more present I am to my mind, but also to my heart and these emotions, and also to my body and these sensations, the more I can be with all that and open to all that, then the more access I have to that space in between, which we might call creative thinking or intuition. And so that's very exciting. And they're willing to go be uncomfortable to go access that knowledge that they're looking for.
What happens when
why do you think that is? We're probably asking.
I'm so juiced up by this conversation. Go, Katie.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I was, the building of connection that I've seen you doing over many years. I'm wondering if there are keys to that. I mean, one thing I'm getting is your complete authenticity, that you live, completely transparently. I'm imagining that ripples and that other people, even though they might be scared of it, they're also probably very attracted by it.
Yes. I think people are longing to just be themselves, be accepted by others for being themselves, and honoring the uniqueness of everybody and how everybody has a particular lens and gift that they have to the conversation that makes us better together when we're creatively thinking.
Yeah. How do you handle when people are not? Because I'm imagining some people have a reaction to the idea of opening to their feelings that's a little more, even if they're scared of it, I have a feeling that there is more or less resistance to it. I'm curious, when you have you work with a group and some, maybe the leaders are, charging the effort, how does it trickle down? How does it happen, or sideways, or upwards, whatever.
Well, I've learned through a lot of error what not to do. And so we spend a lot of time with the leader of the organization, making sure they're really committed. Are you really committed to feeling your feelings and everybody else feeling theirs? And are you going to take a stand for it? Are you going to put a stake in the ground for that? So that you're going to ask your team to join you. And we think of it like as if we were playing basketball. And you say, hey, team, I want you to join me playing basketball, but here are the rules of the game. If you want 3 points, you got to stand back here. This is an out. You got to dribble. There's these rules of the game. And so the leader has to take a stand for, this is just a game I'm playing, but there are rules to the game I want to play. So if you want to play with me, I want to ask you all to commit to feeling your feelings. So if the leader doesn't take a stand for that, then we're going to have, some people are going to want to go outside the bounds and and it's like it would make a chaotic game. And so we go slow and make sure that leader's committed, and then say to the team, this is what we're going to commit to. And if you don't want to play, that's okay. We can help support you in going someplace else. But if the leader won't hold that, we don't go into the organizations anymore. We've just learned it doesn't work. It blows up. People get frustrated. People leave. It can really do damage to a culture. And so we're really thoughtful about now saying the leader has to be really committed.
I've found that it's not only the leader, but I would say the leaders. So there might be the leader, but there also are the team leaders. But
That's
I would
the
say
next level, right?
Yeah, like the executive team.
Yes.
But I totally agree.
The executive team won't commit if the leader doesn't take a stand for it.
Exactly.
Right? And so then the executive team commits, and then we say to the executive team, we're not going to go down to your direct reports until we work with you for a while. And they say, wow, we see a difference. We want what they have. And that's ideally what happens is the leaders inspire the next level of leadership to become self-aware because it looks so good. And we don't want to force feed it into people. We want them to say, oh, you are a thoughtful listener. You're more creative. You're taking responsibility. You are more vulnerable. And I like this. And I want to learn how to do that too. So that's what we say now in leadership is leaders go first. You role model it. So the next level is interested.
It's funny. I was going to ask you, when you do the work you do, what's the before and after picture? You started speaking of it, with the active listening and the taking responsibility and all those dynamics. I'm curious, not that I care about the hard results more than I do about the soft ones, because the ones they used to call the soft were always the most interesting to me. But I'm curious, how does it affect even productivity or people that tend to look at hard numbers? They're like ROI. Can you tell a direct difference after you do the work?
We get lots and lots of feedback about what's different, but there are an overlap of 3 things that everybody says. 1, I do think more creatively. 2, I have more energy, and that's really important. I'm not as overwhelmed. I'm not as tired. I have more access to other parts of my life. And 3, I feel much more connected to my colleagues. I feel closer to them. I look forward to being in collaboration with them. So those 3 things are reliable results that we get from teams who practice.
Well, that's thrilling. I mean, that's those are real life, they're bottom line, but also so expansive. And, I'm also thinking that people are in all of this, they're learning a new language.
Yeah.
The language of speaking authentically and taking responsibility, but also describing what's going on inside. And I'm imagining that ripples out into all aspects of their lives.
Yeah, and it's interesting. You say learning a new language, and literally that's also one of the things when we say what made the biggest difference. It was a new shared language. It's one of the key things they say, and some shared tools. But the shared language is now I understand. Hey, I'm triggered. I'm below the line. We use that model that we got from UK and Gay, and the now I don't have to go, what does that mean? I know what that means, and we can be quick about it. And so we don't have to go into these long, deep, heavy conversations. It can be quick and seamless, and we can move on, but we can understand where we are as humans, and that language really matters. So new language is key. And you've always stood for that of, we need some new language to create new results.
That's so exciting to hear.
I was reading an article from Mark Randolph, who's one of the co-founders of Netflix, and he was talking about what he thinks is most important to the success of a company. There were 3 things, and Cheek and Tongli said 1, people, 2, people, 3, people. And what you just described to me is finally getting to the heart of when you have a team that you have those 3 things with, including the language and the trust and the energy, and you can move as a group. Like a symphony, like a team of very performant sports athletes or whatever we want to see that we kind of agree is a good performing group of people, But the way you're describing it, it sounds like with all of a sudden AI enters the picture and we all have to be like, wow, what is this? How do we function with it? But if you build the team and the people with you, then you move the boat. You don't have to, reinvent. It's almost like you're working with people that have this emotional plasticity, almost intelligence, as you were describing.
Yeah, we like to use this term drama tax. So, how much drama tax is your team having to pay out? Right? And we say, we're all humans, so we're all going to have to pay a little tax, but how much tax depends on how self-aware you are and how able you are to shift yourself out of reactivity. And so those teams that have too much drama tax, they get weighted down. And we talk about it like a rocket ship metaphor. They're trying to see how much can they get rid of weight to get them up off the ground, And so a team wants to think that way. And drama tax keeps you heavy, keeps you, stuck. And so that's one of the concepts that we're passing on, and people really get that an organization that pays too much tax is not sustainable.
And it seems to me that that's all rooted in the drama triangle of the hero, villain, and victim. And I'm imagining that dynamic has shifted more readily with the teams that you work with, because it seems like that's where everything bogs down, is that people, default to the drama triangle.
Yes. And so now a team, I was just talking to a team member the other day, and she said, I came onto a scene with a couple of colleagues and I said, hold on a minute. I think you guys are in the triangle. And, I think you're in hero and I think you're in victim. And they all paused for a minute, went, yeah, okay. And realizing all that's going to cause us tax. It's not going to get us anyplace new. Yeah. And so then the awareness was able to shift the group into something else. And that's exactly what, they're able to do moment to moment more effectively now than they were before.
At the heart of it, I found that using the word movement, even though it's in the field, we made that decision however many decades ago to call it dance/movement therapy. That movement piece is still so strange to people, but when used with the right language, is actually much more accessible. There's such a fear around dance. There's such a stigma around dance and such a misconception around really what dance is when it comes to expression. And then I use movement, and that's challenging, but it was much more easier to explain, because while most people think of movement as exercise, I love to ask the question, how are you moving? And so it really challenges people to think of, well, I must be moving right now, but I'm not exercising. So what am I doing? I'm like, what are you doing? I'm blinking, I'm breathing, my heart's racing or beating in some way. And it levels the playing field, and then I would get, well, what if I'm not mobile? Like, if you're living, you're mobile. Maybe you have challenges to your mobility. Perhaps you choose to, or are confined to a chair. You might be bed bound. You're still moving. So let's look at the movement that's possible. It doesn't have to be exercise at all. I was talking to someone the other day. They were like, well, what do you suggest people do? It's like, just look at the movement you're already doing. If you're a cook, I don't know what that is, but power to add movement in the kitchen. Add more movement to, your crocheting, your knitting, your whatever you're doing, you're already moving. And that seems to have been a game changer for a lot of people.
especially for my clients. So I've really been trying to focus on that movement piece and then how it pertains to our psyche, how it pertains to our mood and what we're feeling on a daily basis.
Having the opportunity to be with both of you on top of being absolutely delicious, I'm really curious because I feel like I move and I have danced. But what would it look like if I came to either one of you and said, I want to do a session, I want to work with this or play, as Katie likes to call work. What would we do? Like, what does that look like to communicate through the body or tell you something through my body?
I mean, for me, sometimes it's very intentional, just asking the client, what would that look like? If your anxiety could speak, what might that say? Or what would the dance of anxiety be? And let the person just have at it. A lot of my clients are very, very resistant and hesitant because they're not used to being in their body. It's such a foreign thing to them. It's actually very threatening. It's not a place of home. They've escaped from it for a reason. And so just the thought of being with it again, even though it's with them all the time, is very dysregulating. So oftentimes it's really about looking at, again, what's already present, and so I might just say, can you notice what you're experiencing? What senses, what's the temperature like in the room? What are you noticing on your skin? Sometimes it is literally just like, can you touch your hand and tell me how that feels for you? So it runs the gamut. It really depends on where the client is in the moment. I've had clients come in who are like, I'm ready to dance. I love to dance. I'm so expressive. Okay, great. And they can create a whole repertoire, a whole choreography without me really having to say much. And other times it's really hand-holding. It's like that toddler, or infant kind of learning to walk for the first time and creating that synergy, that almost like being a medium, if you will, to bridge the language barrier of how we can start to connect with the body again.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that I was just thinking of is something in my moving book, which I wrote almost 40 years ago. And
still so pertinent, by the way.
Yes, I agree, because movement is always pertinent. But one of the things I might ask somebody is, I have a very simple activity from that book that is about moving through your life. And I'll say, move through the room the way you're moving through your life right now. And then that cue, they play with that however they do. And then the second one is move through the room the way you think other people think you're moving through your life right now. So how are other people perceiving you? And then the third one is move through the room the way you would like to be moving through your life. And even if there's not a big response to that, there's a sense of connection that I am moving through my life, and how I'm moving through my life makes a difference, both for my emotions and the choices that I make, but also for my connections with the world and with others. And so for me, it's finding and this is something I really appreciate about you, Erica, that you can help people to translate what's going on in my body and what does that mean, for my life, and particularly for my choices and my well-being, how I experience myself, whether I'm, I feel I'm participating in life or I'm held back from life. So I also will use very simple things like, is the person looking more closed or more open? And if there is a movement that happens just while they're speaking, I might ask them to do that a little bit more. That's one of my entrances that almost everybody can participate with. So if they're saying, and they, touch their face, I'll go, oh, do that more, and then we're often running or often exploring.
I'm so glad that you brought that up, because I think you just made it more accessible for me in a way, in a lot of ways, but to use that language with clients, in terms of, show me how you move through your day. So what I will do, I do like a little bit of a movement assessment pretty much the first time I meet with people. And that's bringing them into the planes of movement. So everybody moves in 3 planes. They're worded differently on kind of who's approaching it or who's teaching it. But I just very tangibly will bring people into like this vertical, into this horizontal, and then into this, what we call sagittal, like this moving forward and back. And so without even asking them that question, which I love, like, how are you moving through your day? They're showing me how they're moving through their day. But almost giving them permission to just go into the space, go into the room, giving them the open-ended, what does it look like? How do you move through your day? How did you move to get here? How do you move during meetings? How do you move with your kids? That's going to stick with me. Like, that's definitely something I want to continue to revisit, because it makes the metaphor of movement through life much more accessible for people, rather than saying, oh, I don't move, I sit on the couch. I'm like, well, that's movement. Like, it's a little bit more stagnant. Maybe it's a little bit more, maybe you're feeling apathetic in that or lethargic, but it's still movement. So looking at the timing of our movement, the rhythm, the pace, this is the heart of dance movement therapy in many ways. And I think what we bring to the table that many other clinicians, practices, fields, even within somatics, don't, because it's not part of their curriculum. Mm-hmm. And we're kind of sitting on it. And I wish more people knew about it.
Well, that is partly why we're having this conversation. And I want to be really transparent and feel really safe to do so. But when you said the way you move says so much about you, it made me feel really self-conscious. Like right away, I was like, well, what does it say? Like, is it showing that I'm, and it's like I projected something that you're obviously not doing. That's completely mine. But it was really already very deep for me, the way you said that, and how it kind of makes me want to choke a little bit, of like how reflective of something that I'm fearing you may think about me without even knowing me, just because I moved my lips that way, or I, did something. It just was really curious how deep it was right away for me.
Yeah, that's what I'm hearing from what you're saying, Soph, is that so many people have the sense that anybody who's looking at them is somehow judging them, or the whole idea that I'm going to be showing something because, it would let me know that I don't feel safe to show up. Mm-hmm. And so most of my movements would be about protecting. But what I find is, if I can meet people in their movement, not just in their speaking, because their speaking is just such a, it's like the paint on the ceiling. It's just so little of what's actually going on. But if I can meet them, and how I often do that is with what we call mirroring. So I won't do the same gesture that they're doing, but I let myself receive the way they're moving and let myself be open to that in my own body. And I find that makes a kind of an invisible connection, that I'm curious and that I'm interested. But I'm actually giving, I do my best to give the choice to the person who's exploring. And that's not just clinically, that's just wherever I'm showing up with people. I want to let them know that I'm present to connect and to play with them, but I'm not going to lead them or say, hey, oh, that's a funny way that you just did that.
Yeah, because when you do it with them, there's that validation of, oh, I'm not alone in this, right? Or sometimes it's the recognition of, oh, that does look, they can say, oh, that is silly, or that is playful, or they can say that looks normal, whatever normal is for them, that looks safe, that looks, so I love that we get to meet people in their movement, and then they get to see in many ways what their movement looks like. So they're witnessing the thing that they're afraid people are judging them over in this safe, non-judgmental space, non-judgmental as much as possible, right? Because I think we're always judging a little bit, even if we don't want to be, right? But we can be open about it. How does that feel for you? Or are you afraid that I'm judging you? As you were speaking too, it just made me think of how much of our movement, once we're aware of it, is for other. That when we're young, we move to survive. We move to thrive. We move out of curiosity and play and to just exist. And then at some point, when someone points out to us what that movement looks like, that development's stunted, his eyes are crossed, his teeth are crooked, like everything about us becomes for other. And then I'm afraid to show up in my body because I don't know what other will think of it. And so for someone to come back and reclaim their movement for themselves, I do this with all my clients, but actually I have a young client I'm working with currently where she said just the other day, she was like, I don't want to move for anybody else anymore. I want to take up space and move for me. And I don't want to be afraid of what other people have to say or think about it. Because half the time they're not even thinking it. It's my own fear of their judgment or me judging others, right? And then holding on to those judgments for myself. And we just practiced like sitting in strange, unusual postures. I kind of, with her permission, moved her body and then allowed her to move it back to a place that felt safe and authentic for her. So, I think our mind really plays a role, because our mind is like, this is how you have to show up in your body. This is what's safe. This is what other people will accept of you. Otherwise, you won't be loved. You won't be accepted. You won't be popular, etc.
You'll be weird.
You'll be weird. That horrible W word, right? And then, when we just embrace the weird, we just show up in our bodies the way that feels authentic for us. All this growth is possible. All this like shedding of, the baggage kind of just slides off.